Hello, Tim.
Hello, Jeff.
Well, thanks for joining me on this fine morning.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, we're chatting before. I used to do a podcast back in the day.
Oh, yes. From 2006 until 2008, we did 26 episodes of Easy Town Radio, which was a variety show. It was a podcast with comedy and music and special guests. And we would occasionally read listener mail from all the folks who would write in, sending us emails. A good time. That was a lot of fun. And what we did was we centered each episode around a certain theme, and each theme was always specific to one classic recording artist or one classic album. For example, we did an episode on the band Rush, and we featured four of their songs during the podcast, and we talked a little bit about the band and the history of the band, and we would share some insight. Being an industry insider, we had our finger on the pulse of what was going on then. I was a musician at the time with a band in New York, and I would later become a music producer. I had done that for more than 25 years in the entertainment industry. And podcasting in 2006 was still very much a sort of what's that kind of a
Oh
thing.
yeah. No, I know. I was
And
listening back then, and all I could think of was, boy, I sure hope this doesn't go away.
it was cool. Hats off to Apple and iTunes. Thanks to them at the time, podcasting was really able to have a chance to become something special like it is today. Today, it's, I think, just the beginning of what's going to be the golden age. We're not even in the golden age of podcasting yet, Jeff. Can you believe that?
I know it. Hey, Tim, could you put the microphone a little close to your mouth? It's getting a little bit. I think it's the Bluetooth connection with the microphone maybe farther away. Here we go.
How's that? A little better?
I think so. Yep.
Okay. I'll try
Yeah.
to speak a bit louder too.
No, you don't need to speak louder. It was almost not quite cutting out, but it's kind of was having a kind of a weird effect. Yeah, and I remember back then, like I'm pretty fortunate, and I have some pretty simple tools. Like I can throw in GarageBand, and and of course mine is very low key production, but it's
GarageBand is exactly what we used when we were podcasting in
oh
'06.
oh okay. So then it works out pretty good, and Anchor makes it very simple. I just dump into Anchor and it does everything else. And I think that probably was different back then. It was probably more manual process of going to Apple and I'm not sure how that was back then.
Yeah, it was primitive, and but I gotta say about GarageBand back in '06, the Foley art that was at our disposal was amazing. From applause to canned laughter to sound effects to anything we wanted to incorporate in the comedy sketches that we wrote and did for radio. It was all very theater of the mind, lampooning this or that, or taking certain situations and turning them upside down. It was very handy having all of those tools that GarageBand offered. It was so cool. And I think it was free at the time.
It's GarageBand still is, so and it probably was then too.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Yeah, and
So
I think
what's going on with RPG Ramblings? You've been doing this for a long time, a whole lot of episodes already so far. I salute you. You're closing in on episode 70,
I
another cool
know.
milestone.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, I the all I knew is I just wanted to do a thing, and I'm doing a thing, and I did plan on timing wise, if it does eat up a fair amount of time of slowing down, but it's like, no, I really enjoy doing this.
Cool, man. Keep it up.
Yeah, and and maybe I'll diversify out a little bit because I've had people come on. I mean, there's a person coming on in the future. He's like, well, I don't, do any sort of, I don't write any products. It's like, well, it's not really the intent of this podcast. Was to have just content creators. It's just, people that are interesting to talk to, and I find that most people that are it seem to be that surface up at Facebook and different places are just fun people to talk to.
There are lots of great, fun people to talk to, especially in this hobby. And when you can connect with RPG folks, whether they are content creators or enthusiasts. I mean, really, it's chock full of interesting folks with cool stories to tell, going back years and years. And I have a question for you, Jeff. And my question is, what year did you get your start with the RPG hobby? How far back do you go with all of this?
Well, the math is bad and it gets all get fuzzy. So whatever it was going back to, so I was probably in seventh grade, whatever age it would be. This would probably be like 78, maybe 79. I got a hold of whatever the blue box is with the dragon, the Earl Otis art in the Keep on the Borderlands, the BX, whatever that was
That
at the
was
time.
the
That's
basic mold base set, I think, from 1981.
Yeah, so that's where I got my start. And for the life of me, I don't know how I got it. I mean, I remember having it. I remember opening it up. I remember reading it. I remember trying to run it for some friends who just didn't get it. But I don't know what caused me to buy it. I don't know if it was the comic book ads, which I think is probably where it happened. So those infamous, those famous TSR ads back in the day would be in these comic books. I think.
That's right. That's right. You would see them in DC Comics, I think. I don't remember ever seeing them in Marvel Comics, but it was nice. There was that crossover appeal. You have comic book readers who um, are very much their own niche. And to think of RPG hobbyists as very much its own niche too is is important now, but think of it with the perspective of back then when the RPG hobby was still in its infancy. And how were they going to build up a clientele and the fan base and all that? I'm glad that they partnered up with the world of mainstream graphic literature because there were lots of kids who read comic books, adults too, but let's face it, kids were the target demographic for comic books. And when we were kids back then, I was born in 70, so I was a kid in 78 when I first started playing advanced D&D. I didn't even start with basic. Our DM wanted to run advanced, and we were all looking at each other like, okay, why not? We'll try it. But we were kids then, so the point being, comic books was a great place to introduce folks to Dungeons and Dragons. Um, it would have been nice if comics also introduced kids to other RPGs because D&D wasn't the only choice then. There were lots of flavors.
Yeah, but I think the thing is they're the ones that had the money, and so they started out from obviously from the wargaming crowd, and they had the
And it
cash in hand
worked.
first.
I think it worked. It helped.
Yeah, and so I mean, back in the day, if you want to buy, if you want to go buy an RPG product, you'd go to a hobby store. I'm not sure where that Mulvey box set came from, but I know that whenever we want to go buy modules, we would have to go to the hobby shop, which would be trains and planes and
That's right.
cars. It wasn't
That's right.
it wasn't until later that it actually became big enough to actually make it to like the Walden Books.
And then Toys R Us, you could eventually go to and start to find some of those things at the larger game chains. Even KB Toys was another game
Oh
chain
yeah,
store.
yeah.
So you started to have more options, but it did begin with the hobby shops, like the train shops. And very interestingly enough, in Long Island, New York, where I was growing up at the time, discovering Dungeons and Dragons for my first time, the only place you could go were the comic book shops and the train hobby shops. If you wanted to get D&D dice, or if you wanted to get miniatures, or if you wanted to get the books themselves. And so I'm glad that those places took a
I
chance
think
on
in my
carrying
area,
D&D stuff.
I don't think the hobby shops, the comic book shops carried role playing games until in my area until much later. I think it
We,
would take a long time for that to get into there for some
yeah,
unknown reason.
it was certainly during the 1980s, during my favorite years of the hobby, the first edition AD&D years from 1977 to 1989. That was and still is my jam today. And when I'm DMing, it's the only system I use. And it's great to see all of these cool milestone anniversary years that popped up lately. Last year, we were celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Fiend Folio. And the year prior to that, we were celebrating deities and demigods. And the year before that, DMG and Player's Handbook, and then Monster Manual. It was so cool to be able to look back at all that stuff and see how it still resonates today and continues to not insult the intelligence of discerning RPG hobbyists. In fact, it'll only expand your vocabulary thanks to the DMG mostly, and with Gygax's colorful prose, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is, it's like, I wouldn't change a thing. It's definitely an artifact of its time. And I also do think, like, I agree with you that there's a certain value in reading that. And I think it's kind of, kind of going back with other things. I think a lot of people bristle at even older literature, even going back, just general literature going back 100 years or 200 years or even further. Uh, but boy, the vocabulary level of the people in previous times are definitely much higher than what is, kind of the standard today. And if you just take the time and make yourself read it, you will develop muscles and it won't be so bad. And even though it may always be purple prose, at least it'll be understandable purple prose, and you'll step up on your vocabulary while you're at it.
That's a very good point. I love reading. As someone with severe hearing loss since childhood, today I'm approximately 90% deaf, both ears. I've grown to become an avid reader and someone who doesn't turn on the television a whole lot, someone who doesn't go to movies in theaters a lot. For me, I love reading. I'll sing the praises of reading as loudly as the day is long. And I encourage friends of mine who have young children who are, just learning to read and whatnot, encourage them to read. And I've often given away stacks of comic books to kids of friends, hey, here, enjoy these,
Right.
Comic books are a great gateway for kids to reading.
Well, they are, and in fact, I think that's what's interesting. In times past, it was seen. Comic books were seen as kind of like, I guess, inferior literature, but it's in a lot of ways, I guess, the gateway drug, so
It
to
is.
speak. It's the
It is.
cannabis of reading.
And but to further illustrate your point, to look back at books from 100 years ago, 150 years ago, it's great to go back and look at some of those classic literature books and revisit the classics. I would recommend anything by Edgar Allan Poe, anything by George Bernard Shaw, anything by Oscar Wilde, William Butler Yeats. All of that stuff is great to go back and revisit.
I
And
remember
if you're feeling,
I went back to fourth century literature, as course translations, but John Chrysostom. It's like,
well,
and
that
it's like,
is a real trip for
let's read some
sure.
John Chrysostom. Yes, but I'm like, he is right. If you look at, like, we always think that we're kind of the smart ones, and you're looking at their limitations of what they had and what they were writing. I'm like, this is absolutely astounding. The
It's very
amount.
astounding. And not everyone had the education back then that people have today. People don't have access or didn't have access to education back then. Women weren't really being educated. And unless you had money, you weren't going to the better universities and such.
And also, what's kind of interesting too is if you go back to, like, say, the 18th century, a lot of people that were learning were more polyglots. I mean, it's like there really wasn't so much people would have a intense understanding of one topic, but they would have broad understandings of a lot of things. And so you weren't just a person that would, read literature. You also understood mathematics. You'd read astronomy, and a lot of those people, when they would write, they could write on many different subjects and be at ease reading multiple languages.
That's right. And if you were a dentist back in those days, you were also the same guy who sawed people's legs off when the time was called for it.
Bite hard, Charlie. It's going to sting a bit.
Oh boy, what a profession. How it's changed. If
Yeah,
anything,
from
it's
the we
become
do
less than
bloodletting
what it once was.
to just a haircut. Yeah. You know, it would be fine to find somebody with a barber pole with a stripe say, "Do you do bloodletting?" Because that's what you're advertising.
Oh boy.
Can you
That
make?
reminds me, I should visit my barber again sometime soon. With the hot weather that we get here in Las Vegas, it's important to keep the haircut short.
Yes, it is. For
Um, Otherwise, you're going to be sweating bullets. Well, not really. Humidity is so low here that you rarely do sweat, but you know what I mean. You want to give yourself some sort of air conditioning up there, right?
Oh yes. I guess the thing I was going to ask you because I grew up in a very small town, so 1,200 people. I live in the Midwest, and we'd travel for half an hour to go into the big city, which is like 100,000 people. In my high school, I would say even there wasn't a lot of us, but I said percentage wise, probably maybe if I do the math, is that right? Yeah, probably at least 20 or 30% of people of the guys played RPGs.
That's
Um,
a healthy percentage.
well, but when you only have 50 people in your class, it's really not. It does take many people to tip it. But I know that for the Midwest, I think because what I've heard is the reason why the Midwest things are so popular is because there's nothing to do. There's nothing to do out here. Okay, it's not New York. There's nothing else to do. Go shoot a gun, go walk around, watch TV. But there's nothing back then. But New York, you're in a cultural, the apex. I mean, you had all sorts of things within short distances. So how did you get in the hobby? And was there a lot of people involved in the hobby at that time?
Great question. There were not many people in my area involved in the hobby back then. And I only knew from 1978 to 1981, I only knew of about 10 people who played. And I met more as time went on, but there was that there was that strange mysteriousness to the hobby that held such a powerful allure for those of us who were discovering it then. And it struck me as strange that the dungeon masters weren't really comparing notes with one another, sharing ideas, maybe different approaches to how to handle a certain mechanic within the game. There wasn't any of that. I had thought that there would be more camaraderie and an exchange of ideas, but everyone existed in sort of a vacuum, I suppose. Maybe there was even this underlying current of competition in a way, I suppose, among them. It was strange. There wasn't more unity in that
Yeah, and I
community.
would say that's pretty true even for us. I think we had our group. There was another people that had their groups, but it wasn't. And there's some people that would just play occasionally. And I would say I don't know that there was for us. I can only speak for ourselves. I just think it there was, I guess, not really seen as an, I don't say a need, but it's like we had our friends and they have their friends and we were
Oh,
kind
of
of friendly
course.
toward each other. But
Of course. And because of you had these vacuums and these groups in their bubbles, they were able to explore the hobby on their own terms in their own way without cross-pollination from how other groups might have been doing something. So no preconceived notions, just go and explore, right?
well, now I just going to explore. I mean, it really was like, obviously the rules were obscure, are not very clear on a lot of things, and there
It
was no
was open
internet.
to interpretation, absolutely. And
And
there
so you
weren't
get a
many
bunch.
resources. Not
No.
everybody could pick up a copy of Dragon magazine and read the pages that would help to demystify the hobby for you.
And so but
Um,
we also just, of course, they may not be answering the questions you have, and so there's a lot of
True.
just, and then I think also because we're young and we just felt we can just make up our own rules as we went, and so we would felt free to do that.
And that was a perfectly acceptable approach. And I think that is great that you did that and that you didn't get
Oh,
bogged down under the,
we all
oh
did.
my God, are we
Everybody
doing
did.
this right? You
Yeah.
know, If you're
Yeah.
having fun, then you're doing it right.
Well,
There's
there are your point. You're like, okay, this is broken. It seemed like a good idea on paper, but
well, then
it's not.
that's when you go back to the beginning and start with first level characters again, and
Yeah.
with a new understanding of how it should go, and it just continues to go on and on. It's like the evergreen conifer pine trees that year in year out they're always nice and green for you. The hobby remains evergreen too, as you find more ways to explore it and enjoy it and meet new folks to enjoy it with, because it's very sociable. And I think that what we're doing at Benchley Academy involves leaving that open door for anybody who wants to immerse themselves in it and have it be a more immersive experience for yourself. You can totally have that, or sit back and enjoy the show, or lurk, or occasionally participate in the contests. But whatever you do, just know that there's an open door policy here for being sociable, and everyone is encouraged to do that. I think in the hobby at large, whether it's first edition AD&D, or whether it's Pathfinder, or whether it's fifth edition, or whether it's Gamma World or Call of Cthulhu, or any of the wonderful RPGs, there are so many. I mean, you can't even name them all. It's not possible. 20 years ago, you could name them all, but today you really can't. And that's a good thing, I think, for the hobby, because it's going to have longevity beyond what any of us really thought it would. I guess I didn't think it would be anywhere near as popular as it is today, but I'm glad that it is as popular as it is today. And I hope to continue to see it increase in popularity. It's a cool niche. It keeps kids out of trouble. It keeps adults out of trouble too.
Yeah.
And you can spend very little money on it or spend a lot of money on it. Your choice. And rest assured, however much money you do choose to spend on it, it's enough. Take it from me.
Yeah.
You can enjoy that toy in your toy box and be perfectly okay with it.
Well, I think in a lot of
Um,
ways that the hobby mirrors the comic book industry. So, you think back and when we were young, I think Marvel Comics and DC, they were at their heyday. And then it started declining
right.
because they could not see the writing. They never went after any market other than what they had. There was manga just started coming into the America and into the United States, gaining popularity. Blind to that, we're just going to keep doing the things we're going to do. Then all of a sudden, manga just exploded, brought a lot of young, a lot of women into reading comic books. And I think as the hobby became more acceptable to women, the hobby acceptable, but just like when I was younger, women just, not that there's anything like guys pushing them out, but society was that women just didn't, that just wasn't a thing that women did, but now it's more acceptable. But it's like the hobby just exploded with comic books, but Marvel and DC kind of got left behind until the movies started to make them money. And I think in a lot of ways now, they're way behind where they could have been if they just would have embraced. But it's like D&D in a lot of ways was like the only game in town, well, D&D, but a lot of those older games, but all of a sudden fresh people started coming into the hobby and just started taking things in different, unique directions, and it lifted everybody.
Here's a fun way to look back at the hobby. You and I, Jeff, right now, we'll go decade for decade. I'll ask you what your favorite RPG thing of all from that decade is. You give me your answer and explain why you chose that. We'll start with the 1970s, and then we'll do 80s, 90s, and so on. But from the 70s, what was your favorite thing from that decade, RPG wise?
Oh, it would have been D&D. That was the only thing in the 70s.
Okay, why?
Well, I mean, that was the game that I had, and that was the game that we played. And I don't think I was really aware of any other games in the 70s. It really wasn't until the 80s I really got to play. I think at that point I only ran a few games, and it wasn't until the 80s that we got a group of friends, and then we really started cranking out playing games.
Why do you suppose it was D&D in the 1970s that was really the most prominent of the tabletop RPGs?
I think it's the most accessible, and I think it was also the best marketed. I don't think, I think fantasy, I think in general, I don't think it has to be that way, but I think the fantasy elements, I think because it, that's a good question. I think, I think the way that it grew out of the wargaming uh, origins and its initial somewhat simplicity, like with the mold bay, I think made it very accessible and relatively easy to understand and easy to run. And I don't think at the time there were the tools to run things that were complicated, narratively speaking. And I think probably those, the dungeons, probably the dungeon crawls made it a very accessible and fun experience for people. And I think at that time, I'd say, I think Traveler, in the sense, there's no reason Traveler couldn't have been uh, more successful, except I think it was the adventures and how easy it was to start out the table is probably what made D&D most successful. Because Traveler didn't really have that. If you look at the early adventures, it's still kind of a mess. But at least with Keep on the Borderlands, hey, there's a dungeon, we're playing, and we can do that.
Good point. I remember Traveler, and I loved that Traveler was a thing. And I always had heard about Traveler, and I'd seen the ads for it in Dragon magazine, and I was dying to be invited into a Traveler game. And from the 1970s until about 2015, I went all those years without being invited. And finally I was. And it was like a dream come true for me. And it was so much fun. And I do remember Traveler being around in the 70s. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Jeff, when you said marketing. D&D had the marketing behind it.
And
Traveler did not.
well, and I think the thing is too, is at the time they were blind. You know, of course they were, when I say they, I mean, those early developers, they were blind to what people wanted. But how would they know? They
Right.
know because, you know, if you're Gary Gygax and you can whip up adventures like this, you think, well, everybody's just going to want to run their own adventures. Nobody's going to want pre-made adventures. But it's like, no, that's what people want. And really, it probably was Judges Guild, you know, who you're like, yeah, go ahead, I don't care. Go ahead and make your, you know, your nickels and your dimes. I don't care. And all of a sudden, they're making bank. He's like,
Judges Guild. Here's a funny story. I didn't know about Judges Guild at all until the 2000s. For me, it was a real revelation of unearthing this incredible time capsule of the hobby that I had no idea about. And then I began to discover the modules that were being published for it and being not blown away by the production value of them, because let's face it, they were not big on production value, but it didn't
well,
matter.
it's put on newspaper print, right, or as newspaper
Yeah,
paper.
right. And the typesetting of it was, you know, it was all very amateurish, and I get it. And I know that they probably didn't have a whole lot to work with budget-wise, but I was so astonished to finally discover something that had been around and had been a part of first edition AD&D for so long. And so for me, it was real nice to discover that. And it led me to discover some of my all-time favorite adventure modules, such as Dark Tower.
We ran
And
that. We ran that in the 80s.
oh man, love it. Love the idea of the subterranean underground dungeon that has one level where you go down through 5 levels,
Yeah.
and then you got to go across this one big level to get to the other level that goes up another 5 levels. And those other 5 levels that go up are all magically darkened levels. Fantastic concept. Blew my mind. And I tried running it as a referee, as a DM, about 10 years ago. And we got pretty far with it. I'm glad to say that we tried. The group fell apart. I was having some health issues. I had to take a step back from a few things, and that was one of the things that I took a step back from. But my health is in a much better place these days.
Oh, good.
And yeah, so I'm able to enjoy the hobby just as much as I can.
So, what were the
Uh,
challenges running it? So, What did you find when you're running it? What were the challenges?
When I was running Dark Tower,
Yeah, yeah.
the biggest challenge for me as a dungeon master running Dark Tower was trying to figure out what to do with those overpowered gems that would fly around and attach themselves to the foreheads of players. As if you're going to run the module straight word for word, that was the biggest hurdle for me. So my ultimate decision as a referee, and I regret this decision. They say never regret anything, right? Because it always teaches you something. But in this case, I really do regret having hand waved the overpowered gems from the module. I think looking back, it would have been a lot more fun to randomly have these gems appear from out of nowhere and lodge themselves onto the foreheads of characters, and then their entire personality changes as they become someone else and think that they're someone else, and then have to be essentially someone else until the gem is removed. And to remove those magical gems from foreheads, it took a lot. And I didn't feel comfortable including that aspect of it then, but now I absolutely love the gonzo element of that. And I would totally include that again next time I run Dark Tower. And I don't
It,
want to say if I run it, I'll say when I run it,
well,
because I do
we
want to.
so when we ran, we were teenagers, so there was no looking at a module and saying, you know what, is this overpowered or not? I mean, it was as written, whatever
It
it
was what it
is.
was. I get it. How far did you get with it?
I don't remember. I don't remember. I do
Okay.
remember. I don't know.
Maybe your character was mutilated somehow so badly that it traumatized you. So you blocked it from memory and you'll never recall what happened.
Well, I ran
And
it,
maybe
but I
it's
just
better
don't.
that way.
I don't remember running it. I just ran so many things. I remember owning it. I remember loving it. The jewel in the skull, harking to Hawk Moon. It's very
Oh,
comic booky, and I think there was like two factions. Wasn't there? There was an evil faction, the good faction, the gods, and being pawns, and you know.
Jewel in the Skull is still, I think, my all-time favorite Michael Moorcock novel. And people think I'm crazy because some of his stuff was a bit more popular than that. So I could choose something a bit more popular, but that's not what that's not what life's about. Like what you like and feel free to admit it and don't be ashamed. Be your most authentic self at all times. And okay, so Jeff, I asked you about the 70s and you gave a good answer there. Now I'm going to ask you about the decade of the 1980s. What was your favorite RPG thing from that decade?
Yeah, because there's really probably two, because we play, I would say, a lot of different games. I mean, we probably ran, I don't know, 15 different systems.
Nice. Oh, wow. That eclipses what I ran.
Yeah, like Boot Hill, Gamma World, Aftermath, Morrow Project, D&D. Um, we ran
You were keeping yourselves busy.
Iron Crown Enterprises stuff. We ran,
Oh, nice. I love spell law. And
yeah,
oh God, spell law is great, especially the way they set up that system for the different spellcasters to have spells.
oh yeah.
And to read through the descriptions of some of those spells, I mean, it was just so inspired. And it inspired me as a DM. It was great to see what Iron Crown did with that stuff. And it
And
was
we,
great to see Iron Crown ads in Dragon
oh
magazine.
yeah, those were great. Yeah, yeah, exactly. We ran
Dragon
like,
wouldn't let anybody advertise. It was so cool. Everything didn't have to be a TSR ad. And I really liked that about what TSR did at the time. They
right
allowed
at the
others to
time.
come enjoy the feast with us.
And I think, if I remember right, Tim Cass, I think his editorial policy was, they do reviews on things they liked. They didn't try to beat up on
It
on
was thanks to
publishers.
ads in that magazine I discovered Games Workshop, and I discovered um, what else? Oh, TSR UK. When TSR launched the UK branch in the 1980s, and all of a sudden you have British content being created for the hobby, that was a real wonderful moment for me as a young hobbyist to think that, oh wow, here I am, armchair Anglophile, And now there's cool stuff coming out of England for the hobby. That's great, and then they're doing the choose your own adventure books, and then everything's starting to become cool with White Dwarf magazine becoming another magazine that you can find and read. It didn't just have to be Dragon. It could now be White Dwarf.
Right.
And that was a fun time. That was a fun time. D&D did well, not D&D, but TSR itself as a company didn't expand really beyond the UK. I think they could have, and TSR UK certainly could have lasted longer than it did, but it was great to see it happen. Even just the fact that it happened was something I'm still grateful for. But I'm sorry, please continue.
Oh,
1980s, your favorite
what?
RPG thing.
Well, I will say, and probably even though I don't, it's got to be Traveler.
It's
So,
Traveler.
but
Cool.
we also played. I mean, so much. But I'll say probably the number two. And I think it's because I'm not sure why it is, but we just love Traveler, and but it wasn't the game that we played the most, and it's not the game I ran the most or played the most, but it was definitely. I think that probably sits, even though I almost never run it or play it. It's still, or even do much reading. It's still probably in my heart, probably my favorite of all the systems, of all the settings, of all the games.
It's a great system, and I love it. That feeling when you first muster out. It's unlike any other feeling that you can get if you're trying to take a rules as written approach with other systems. I love it. Traveler is great. It will always have a place in my heart for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think it's with it doesn't. I think on one hand it does have its shortcomings, but on the other hand, I've got the hardback where that where they collected the little black books, put it into hardback, and added some art. But the fact is,
Mhm.
you can look at the breadth of I think the whole game's there within like 100, like 120 pages or whatever. I can't remember I counted, but the whole game is there. You don't need anything else. I mean, I think the planetary generation system could probably it's still a little, I think, needs more to flesh it out. But in general, it's all there. Space combat, purchasing starships, economics, character creation
Right.
within
And plenty
120
of
pages.
lots of elbow room and wiggle room if you want to, as a referee, and you want to add some flavor of your own. You're not going to feel boxed in there, and it's pretty good. It's a great system. I enjoy it every time I got the chance to play it. Never had the chance to referee it. Always only just experienced Traveler as a player.
Yeah, and I think the thing is I've ran it I've run it under the hero system. I've ran it using the regular system. And some games have been economic games, and other games have just not been. But I mean, if you want to get a spreadsheet going, that's your jam. You can you can you can just do trading missions and then have adventures wherever you show up.
Wow.
It's
Well, I would love it someday if you, Jeff, were to ever referee, even if just a one-off, a Traveler adventure at Benchleydale Academy. You let me know if you ever want to do something like that on Zoom. I think we
I
can make
think I'm
that happen.
better. I think I'm better about talking about GMing than I am at GM.
That's fine. It's an open window. You just let me know if you want to call in.
I will. I
Um,
will.
but okay, cool. So we've done the 70s, so we've done the 80s, and this has been a lot of fun so far. Now I'm going to ask you, Jeff, about the 1990s. What was your favorite RPG thing from that decade?
It's got to be the hero system. I would say kind of blends in. I'm going to kind of put that into. I think we even made it 2000. There was a gap, but the hero system is probably we played a lot of it in the 80s and early 90s. A lot. Ever true? No, I think I stopped playing. Actually, I take that back. I stopped playing
Oh, you're a liar.
87. Yeah, so I stopped in 80. So 87 is probably when I stopped. And then I started up again in the 2000s.
Oh, okay. So there's a gap that leaves us still with the 1990s for a decade that we need your favorite RPG
But I
thing
wasn't
from.
playing at the time.
Okay, but of the stuff that had come out content-wise from publishers during that decade, looking back on it, what do you think looking back on it through this lens, what might be your favorite thing that
If
happened
we're,
during that
if
decade?
I would say that I'm not a big fan of heresy alert.
Uh-oh.
I don't think the '90s were a good decade for games. I don't. I of course somebody may say, well, what about this or what about that? But I think in general, I'm just gonna make this hot take. I think the system started turning into, this is not what kept me from playing, but I think systems started turning to a level of complexity that was no longer quite as fun. So I'll include 3.0 in that. I think it seems like I never really played, but it just seems like that was the hyper crunch was kind of, I think, coming in vogue. And it probably was starting in the late 80s and just kept going. That may be an oversimplification.
Okay. I think I know what you mean. There certainly was a good deal of what I saw as unnecessary expansion. And now all of a sudden, instead of just having to, you know, buy two, three, maybe four books to enjoy the hobby, now you find yourselves wondering if you should buy two, three, 400 books. Well, I don't think that went over real well with a lot of us. And so I think I get it where you're coming from with that. And
Well, but
certainly,
but in like Vampire the Masquerade, like World of Darkness, I never was into that. And I think that's probably a solid system, but that never appealed to me.
I
And
get
I
it.
think
And
it,
from a capitalism standpoint, I understand why they tried to do it, and I give them credit for trying.
well, they
Did
gave
it,
people what they wanted, and I think they,
and I suppose so. I
and I think it
suppose
was
so.
important is they brought a lot of women into the hobby because they did
Right?
something beyond just, we're chopping, we're just going and killing stuff, and we're going to also hide behind mindless levels of statistics and complicated rules. Like, no, we're going to have very rich storytelling, rich background,
Yes.
but it's
Mhm.
also, if you want to get into it, it's very, but if you like the a narrative, something that's narratively deep, that's a good way to go. But that just didn't, appeal to me.
Cool. All right, good. So that's the 90s. Now let's talk about the 2000s. I think you're going to say heroes, but
Yes.
I'll let you say it.
Well, yeah, it was a hero system, and that was what I loved. And when I went back to hobby, I went and picked up Fred, 5th edition. Did you ever play the hero system?
I have never played it, and I have still to this day never even been invited to try it. It's on that particular list of systems that I wish it wasn't on, but so no, not yet.
Have you played GURPS?
Many times. I was a big GURPS guy in the early 90s, and we didn't want to play West End game Star Wars for whatever reason, so we used GURPS to play Star Wars. And we didn't see a John Steed and Emma Peel Avengers RPG, so we used GURPS to do that sort of British classic spycraft stuff. We used GURPS for a lot of stuff, and I liked that system because of the way it was so interchangeable with whatever you needed it to be. It was that for you,
I think
and
I'm.
so I
I
enjoyed
think
it for that.
I need to walk stuff back because I take this back because I think now you bring that up. Like West End Games was what popular in the '90s, and that wasn't a complex system, and that was a very popular system. The D6, exploding
It
dice.
was. It was. Many people still highly regard that old system as the best Star Wars RPG that you can find.
So I think it's wrong of me to state that it was overcome. I think of the explosion of like Palladium books and all these other things. I think that's what my mind goes to in the complications of 3.0. And I forget there were systems out there, I never played them, that were simple. And I also realized I embraced the hero system at the point where it became more complex. It
And
went
that's
from
not a
being,
bad thing.
no, but just I'm just saying is,
Complexity is okay. From
no, I'm
adversity
just
comes
saying as far
strength
as
and
what I
growth and all that.
stated, I think what I misstated is when I look back at what I said, it's like, no, that's not true what I stated, because I did enjoy the complexity at its highest. But it is true that I think in the '90s there was with Fred, I think that was early 2000s. that was the apex of complexity. And then afterwards, people started, in the 2010s, started looking at with the indie boom. It started trying to start simplifying things and get to the essence.
Yeah.
But the hero system, no, it was by far. I loved it, still love it. But I don't think if you've not played, you played GURPS, I don't know that you're missing anything.
Okay. Well, then if it's akin to GURPS, then I'm sure I would be able to slide right into Heroes as if I were putting on a comfortable pair of old slippers.
Yeah, I think the only thing that would, in my understanding, is what people say. I can't speak for myself because I never really played much GURPS. Is that GURPS tends to handle, and I think it's probably true, is that GURPS handles low level characters better than higher powered characters, where the hero system tends to be more so the other way, from what I've heard. But even though Fantasy Hero was a lot of fun, and I'm not sure if that's quite true, but I think there's less granularity at lower levels than there are at higher levels. So where GURPS is more granular at lower levels, from what I understand.
I will have to take your word for it, my friend. I have no frame of reference, having never played Heroes, but I certainly defer to your eternal and infinite wisdom.
Well, yeah, but I will say that the only really way, to be fair, the only way you can really effectively be a GM and create characters is you have to get the software to the character maker software, the JavaScript. To do it by hand or without a spreadsheet is very time consuming.
I gotcha. Sometimes technology is our friend.
Well, it's because of the map behind the character creators is point by, and there's so many different ways you can
I
modify it.
know. Right, I know. Point
So,
by is fun though, for what it is.
but we played superheroes, we played Traveler, we played fantasy, we played. I mean, I ran.
Did you get to
A
play
night.
Marvel superheroes and also the DC Comics games?
No, I never played Marvel superheroes, which I'd like to at a convention sometime. The DC, I would like to have. I never played that. I did play shortly a game of Mutants and Masterminds for a few sessions online.
Cool.
Is that true? Mutants Masterminds? Yeah, I think so. And but no, it's so
That's
I
a
don't know
great
how those.
name for a game, by the way.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, if you're going to do the alliteration, it is probably a little more clever. But anyway, it's a very versatile. I also played a 30s action horror game as well.
Oh, nice.
So I
Set
took
where? Like set in the jungle, set in the desert? What?
no, it was set in it's like Chicago, but the
Oh,
adventure I ran
urban.
was
Okay.
the cult of the reptile god,
Nice.
but I turned it into a 1930s town in Arkansas,
Cool.
and only had to change a little bit, and it worked.
I like that kind of low tech adventuring. And I'm guessing there was no magic involved with this. It was just very rooted in in almost like film noir, I guess, right?
No, there was a magical snake at the end.
Oh, there was magic involved. Okay,
But the
cool.
characters didn't run the magic. It was no, it was definitely it was horror. It was at the end. It was there was the reptile god was a giant poisonous snake and or venomous
Okay.
snake.
I was just about to ask, was it more psychological horror, a more slasher horror? Like what kind? But you just answered it right there with the big snake. Yep.
Well, and another time they wound up going after some artifacts in the Orient in the Mid East. So it would go all over. It was kind of Indiana Jones. Think of Indiana Jones with horror. I guess it would be like Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones had horror, so it's kind of like Indiana Jones, except
Yeah, I like that pulp feel.
but they were called Troubleshooters Incorporated, and the idea was you had something. The concept was somebody had a problem, you'd call troubleshooters, and you'd
Hmm.
pay them money, and they take care of your troubles.
hey, there's a big giant snake over here. Let me call troubleshooters.
Well,
I'll
I
be
think
right back.
somebody didn't hear from their spouse and or a relative or something was going on, and they were paying them a lot of money to go investigate. So it worked
Oh
fairly
man,
well. It worked really well for that. And
that's
well,
fun.
the Cult of the Reptile God works so well. That's the thing is that was it is so easy to reskin that into a modern set, like unbelievably easy. Like, and that was a UK module, isn't it?
This is N1 by Douglas Niles, Cult of the Reptile God, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That that module, I agree, is absolutely fun. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is it is is the big bad in that module Sakata, or am I confusing that with the Lizard Man King? I always
I
get
don't know.
Reptile God and Lizard Man King modules mixed up. I'm so bad. I apologize.
Well, I
Uh,
am not. I do not remember my modules, and I'm not. I don't play D&D very often. Well, almost never. But
well, that breaks my heart to hear you say that, Jeff. I would love to see you enjoy D&D a bit more often.
well, I just I am starting to run an old school essentials game for. I just high fantasy
Old
is just
school
not my sweet one.
essentials. I just recently became aware of old school essentials like within the past couple of years. This is not an old corporate entity or whatever you want to say, a company that's
No.
been around, right? It's been around only recently, right?
Yeah, my understanding is I'm just going to make a jab, and no, people are going to probably say no, but I would say the last 5 years or so. You know,
Within the
it's
last 5 years. Okay, that's cool.
I think
Fair
it was
enough.
originally BX Essentials. It originally was what it was called, and I think over the time they finally just said, you know, it's old school. Did some editing and bada bing, and then next thing you know, he's got a $750,000 Kickstarter.
Right.
Um,
Okay. Cool. It's good to see that. I like that. I like folks enjoying and taking a look back towards the older ways. There's a lot of good that can still come from exploring the roots of our hobby. And it's nice to nourish those roots and not forget about them, And I think that we're probably 10, maybe 15 years away now from first edition AD&D becoming a dead language. So it's nice to still be able to celebrate it and commemorate it these days, right? Wouldn't you agree?
oh no, I do agree, and it just for myself, it just tends to be I do not dislike. I really don't dislike high fantasy. I don't even like. I prefer my fantasy to be like if magic is going to be. Of course, I'm going to you're gonna, I'm going to make a the next statement is going to be full of hypocrisy because I'll tell you why I'm also doing the exact opposite. I generally tend to prefer that the magic be very rare and dangerous and scary rather than commonplace. And the
Okay, I
idea
get
that
that.
you can just find a +1 sword here and a potion of healing. I kind of like the idea where even with the hero system was you would improve your skills, but um, that's still always around the door because if you were to be dealing with an ogre, he can take you out with one hit. No matter how big of a dude you are going to think about how you're going to deal with an ogre. Where, with most like the D&D, it's like there's a point where ogres are more like orcs. It's like, okay, I can take him. And that's what I don't like is that level of power. And it probably has to do more with higher level play.
And I get that too, because you want things to be a bit more dangerous, and I'm totally cool with that. And I think that no player character should plan on surviving the first three adventure sessions of any adventure, whether it's a referee running a module or whether it's an ongoing open campaign that just goes on and on. Uh, three. You get 3 sessions. After that grace period, you are lucky to have survived.
Well, but that's what I
And
would run. But I do appreciate that, like with fifth edition, I do appreciate that they make the scale to third level easier, quicker, which I think kind of makes sense. But old school essentials is like the opposite. But I do appreciate I do appreciate what D&D does, Advanced D&D to 5th edition. I do appreciate what they do. It's just that the progression and in general, the underlying um, background or themes, I do enjoy playing. I just don't necessarily always enjoy running.
Okay. And that's cool. And I
So, like for instance,
appreciate that it's
you guys
there.
are doing like Expedition to Barrier Peaks. I ran Expedition to Barrier Peaks as a one shot like a couple years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and fun. I loved it. And you guys are running. It's like, you know what? I got time. I would love to play in there. I mean, I don't necessarily hate it. I'm not necessarily antithetical to it, but for me to run it as far as a ongoing campaign as a one shot, yeah, it's fun. I enjoy the high level play. I love the spells. I love Fireball. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, you just went ahead and went there, pal, because I'm DMing S3. You DM'd it already. So as from one S3 DM to another, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about how you DM'd it. And the first question I'm going to ask is, in real time, how many weeks or months or days or what have you did it take for you to run the module as just a one shot, like you said?
Well, what I did is I got a friend to co-GM, and
Okay.
we had enough people that we could split the party.
Oh, okay. How many people?
And I think we had about, I don't remember, we may have about 6 or 7 players.
Cool.
We ran it as 5th edition,
Okay.
and we played it for like 6 hours.
Did you enjoy it?
Oh, it was fun. I think, not to, I think there are some there's some things I really don't like about it.
Like
I
what?
think, well, I
It's okay.
think,
You can tell us. We're among
well,
friends
I just
here,
need
right,
to,
everybody?
no, I'm not, yeah, I'm not hesitating because I'm afraid. I'm just trying to collate my thinking. I think the problem is in some ways the ship's too big. And the veggie pygmy level, it's just, I don't know how to describe it. I think there are some things that are just they're just too large a scale, and you get lost in a thing that maybe isn't always that interesting. And I
Okay.
think if you're really to play out the veggie pygmies, I mean, the amount of veggie pygmies there is going to be astronomical. I mean, it's crazy. And I just think if it were, honestly, I think it would be served better if the ship was maybe half the size.
Okay. Well, aren't you glad you got that off your chest?
Yeah.
Phew.
Now,
All
Dyson
right.
Logos, he
Now,
did.
what did you love about S3?
Oh, it's because it's Gonzo, and I think it's the okay. It is as far as just a module, as a concept. I think the idea was, I think adding science elements are fun, and I think adding elements that are science that people can relate to is fun. But I think I think I just think the weird science stuff was the fun stuff. So like the robots, you had robots acting differently. You had the robot police.
Hmm.
I think the key card stuff, I don't know, probably could be better implemented. I think having the concept of what happened, the storyline was great. I think we had one party got ejected by the one of the groups got ejected by the robots in the dock, and another group got eaten by the froghemoth.
Oh no! Spoiler alert for those of you out there who are players in my S3 campaign. Okay, I'm
well,
sorry. Go
well,
ahead.
well, if you look at the cover, if you look at
That's
the
okay.
cover, it's a giveaway, I believe. Maybe not, but anyway, I think even the gotcha stuff was fun. They
Hmm.
didn't, but they could see some of the gotcha stuff a mile away.
Right. Especially the more seasoned players.
I,
But
yeah, I would say,
they understand though. They get it.
I would say, so what was funny was the reason why the one group died is because the other group lied to the group.
Oh, no.
It was all good. Everybody was fine. They were all friends. So, you know,
Wow.
and
It's a fun adventure. I'm glad it exists. I know people don't like it. I get why they don't like it, but I also know there are some people who like it, and I happen to be one of those people, and I'm glad to be
yeah,
one of those people.
I think I just think it would, I would be interested to see what Goodman, if I were, well, I should say that. That's a little strong. I think if I were really interested in doing it again, I would probably buy the Goodman games
That's cool. I
reissue,
think I
and
think
then
they do some good stuff, good in games.
I would look at what they did with the fifth edition
Cool.
and see if unique, if this changes, if whatever they did change wise, if that would make sense to look at those. I'd be interested in how they handle certain things, but no, it's a fun adventure. There's nobody who's going to play this, run through this. It's not going to have fun.
I agree, and I am having a blast DMing it. But we started DMing it in March of 2020, and now it's coming up on more than 2 years of running S3 continuously from the beginning. Um,
I think it, if I were to, let's say I was to be able to buy this, the intellectual property, buy everything from Wizards of the Coast. Either I would flesh out it more, like rather than reducing the number of, say, Vegapygmies, and maybe I would either reduce the size by a half or by 2/3 or by a third, shrink it a third, or I would take what it is, expand it out, and then give and then treat it, instead of as being like a one shot, or this is what we're gonna do and we're done, is to then have it be more of a living type dungeon and give more guidelines and hooks for this thing. Like, this thing will never go away, and people continually going in there, and what that would mean.
well, I've got good news for you, Jeff.
Oh my
And
goodness.
the good news is that you, my friend, do not need to buy Wizards of the Coast to make that happen. You can, as a referee, make all of those changes yourself and enjoy it and experience it yourself. And that's, I think, the part of the beauty of it too, is that dungeon masters have the freedom to add their own creativity to what comes in the module. And so I think it's great that you would
Oh,
love to do different things with the ship and not just run it word for word. And I think all dungeon masters and referees, game masters should be also feeling as if they have the freedom to do the same too, and not.
oh, I don't feel I don't have the freedom to. I'm just saying is I just want to pay somebody to do it for me.
I know, I know. And I was just sharing good news with you. That's all.
It's
um,
not because I lack the. I just don't. The other thing I find is adventure writing is a tricky thing, and especially when dealing with that. But boy, it would be fun to get some high-powered individuals and say, you know
I
what,
agree.
this is going to be a thicker thing, and we're going to throw this out, and this is a campaign, and this is what it means. Maybe play out the factors a little bit more. But the other thing nice about, I think, is probably like we'll call it a mega dungeon, is that there's just you can run it multiple times and it'll be different. There's things that these players never came, obviously, like with most adventures, there's just things that they never even came close to coming across that are, fun and interesting, and everybody had a great experience. It's just,
Yeah, I never. It never occurred to me that I should turn the spaceship in S3 into a mega dungeon where if player characters get down to the lower level of the ship and then they get all the way down to the lowest level, what happens then? The module doesn't take it any further. But as a referee, you sure as hell can. So what you can do is have there be another set of levels below the existing levels of the spaceship and just repeat the same levels from the module again. The players will be none the wiser. And you can easily turn S3 into the ultimate mega dungeon experience that never ends. And I'm not saying that you should, because
Right.
this isn't great advice, mind you, because you will lose
Well,
friends, you will lose everything, you will lose sleep. So don't do that, please. But you could if you wanted to, and I'm glad that you can, I suppose. But it never occurred to me that I should, and I'm
well,
glad
the
that I'm
the
not doing
problem's
that.
going to be is not if we're I won't give spoilers away, but there are vast quantities of certain kinds of weapons that people can eventually gain
Yes,
that you can
correct,
disrupt kingdoms with.
correct. Correct. And I'm all about chaos, and I'm all about the Gonzo approach. And we do have old school Wild West six shooters in our D&D world. These things exist, and we're DMing. Well, I'm DMing S3, so science fiction exists, and it's all okay to have that stuff. Now, you wouldn't want player characters to be running around with laser rifles and a backpack filled with ammunition so that they're really never going to run out of ammo. You don't want that, of course. But as a DM, do I mind that they have maybe one or two rounds that they can fire off of one of these things, and then that's it? They have no more power from the battery packs that you need for the weapons. Then I'm okay with that. Yep, I think. But they're going to have to work for that. They're going to have to really go and find that stuff. You don't really
But
find it on level one. You got to go exploring a bit deeper. Again, spoiler alert. Sorry, folks, if you're playing S3 and I'm your DM right now, pretend you didn't hear me say that. Anyway, Jeff, as you were.
well, I'm also wondering too. It's like um, because you do, like I say, you this is nation changing. But the other thing is too is another thing I've wondered about the legalities of it, or maybe not the legalities of it, but the other thing I started thinking about too. It's like you there's no reason a person. I'm wondering from just from a business standpoint, you could publish your own adventure of S3, and I wonder if you just publish it in a way that you're not referencing S3, but the idea is you're not even putting that map on there, but the understanding of whatever adventure it is, D&D adventure, that you're going to use existing maps.
Okay,
I
sure,
wonder
I could
how
see
that would
that.
fly. I wonder how that fly if you could rewrite like the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. I don't know
And
if there's a way of
and
doing that,
then
or if that, or the legalities of that.
you mean rewrite it as an adventure module for publication?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that you should first of all speak to your lawyer and run it by him, because I'm no expert. You really should. And if you know somebody in publishing, speak with them too. Just ask them. It's
Oh
a good
well, yeah, I'm
question.
not going to do this, but I just kind of wonder. It's like you have the
It's a
map,
it's a good discussion to have.
and you can say like keep on the borderlands, but if you never call it keep on the borderlands, but I don't know how you would tie it in people's minds. It's like I used to wonder if you
I
could,
don't know. I wonder.
and I also
Change
wonder if you,
names, reskin
yeah,
anything.
and I also wonder too, like what if you wanted to do a Star Wars adventure, but you did Microsoft Word, and then
Yeah.
all you did was you renamed every race, every name, and then you maybe have a separate. You just tell people this is the find and replace, and people go and find and replace, print it out, and there you go.
My first thought is that people would greet such a publication with scorn, frowning upon it as if it were something so transparently derivative that it has no value whatsoever. That's my first initial thought. But my second initial thought is, you know, if I were to overestimate the intelligence of the average person, I'd be making a big mistake, wouldn't I? And so
But if you
my
want Star
second
Wars
thought,
content, you want it printed.
right?
But of course, but it requires somebody to go through the extra work. That's the problem. Most people aren't going to want to do that.
Right. And as far as you knowing that it's a ripoff of Star Wars with the serial number filed off, then you're going to keep that as a secret to yourself, right? You're not going to say to your publisher, "Oh, by the way, here's what I did. I hope you don't mind." right?
Right. No, this is something I'm not actually contemplating, but it's just a thought experiment. I wonder. The idea is, could a person do that? That's what I wonder. And would it be
Okay,
viable?
I can answer that. The answer is yes, a person could do that. And now what the consequences might be of the person doing that, well, we'll find out, won't we?
So does Disney have lawyers? Is that, do you think they may have some lawyers?
Why you got an idea that you want to pitch?
Oh.
Go for it.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
No, no,
hey,
but
listen, it
yeah.
wouldn't be the worst idea in the world, believe me.
Well, unless I wind up in jail, then my wife would think so.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that's a felony even. It might just be a misdemeanor. Who knows? You might get off with a slap on the wrist because you're a first time offender. Who knows?
There is the theory that all possible realities exist. It's too bad we just can't peek at a few of those.
Right.
So how did it
Isn't
work?
that
How, how did it work for
that's a
Jeff on
thought.
Earth 7718?
Oh God, don't get me started on Earth numbers. I recently saw that I was reading, what was it? Marvel Zombies, right? And at some point, I just for the hell of it decided to go and look at the Wikipedia page for Marvel Zombies. And it says Marvel Zombies is set on Earth 22614 or something like that. And I'm like, geez, got enough Earths there, Marvel? I don't think DC has that many Earths. I know they have Earth 1 and Earth 2. I know there's an Earth X. I know there's maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 others, but that's it. Meanwhile, Marvel is just like boom, and they're calling the current Earth number 616 in their continuity. It's considered the 616, which begs the question, well, what happened to the first 1 through 615 Earths? What's the deal there? It's like that age-old question, why did Atari call the Atari 2600 the Atari 2600? Why didn't they call it the Atari 2000? Or why not the Atari
That's a good question.
2601? You wonder, who knows? Who knows why? It's probably just an arbitrary choosing of a number by random, as far as I can guess. Who knows? I wouldn't know. What would you think is the reason for why they we're calling Earth 616 Earth 616, and why are they calling Atari 2600 Atari
Well,
2600?
616 is a reason. I forget what it is. And I wasn't interested enough to remember, but there is a very specific reason it's 616.
Okay, I am oblivious to it. Perhaps I'll find the reason someday. Until then, it
Yeah.
shall remain a mystery.
Yeah. And
Ah, sweet
in my
mystery
comic
of
book
life.
readings, yeah, I'm not a
That's
current
Kiss.
collector. But what I have done is I've subscribed to Marvel Unlimited. So I've been kind of, picking and choosing, going back.
Okay,
So a lot of stuff I've missed out on. And so
me
I don't
too.
know.
I like to go back and reread a lot of the old classics, or for me anyway, they're classics.
Have
But
you,
I also
but
dabble in the newer stuff sometimes.
Oh, I do too. In fact, I find some of the new stuff like really, really good. Have you read the Immortal Hulk?
Immortal Hulk is one of the titles that was recommended to me. That's written by Jeff Lemire, I think, or at
Yeah,
least
I
it
don't know.
was in the early issues. And I'm a fan of Lemire's writing. I really enjoy his Black Hammer series of comics. But Immortal Hulk, I heard about the premise and how it involves all of a sudden there's a new Hulk in the Marvel universe, and here he is, and he's very different from what you expect, from what one might expect. And I have not yet picked it up, but I've been so tempted over the last year to pick up the first trade and at least experience the first 5 or 6 issues of it, see how it treats me. And then if I want to grab volume 2, I'll go and grab volume 2. They're easily found, and
Oh
Amazon
yeah.
has it, the local shops have it. They're never out of stock. It seems pretty popular. What is it about Immortal Hulk that you like, though, Jeff?
Oh yeah. Are you familiar with Bernie Wrightson?
What's that?
Bernie Wrightson?
Oh, Bernie Wrightson, the artist. Yeah. Oh, he does the penciling, right?
No, but this is very Bernie Wrightson esque.
Oh, so
And
it's evocative of the Wrightson style. Okay.
oh yeah, it's
Who's
not
doing the
so.
art? Is it Kelly Jones or one of the other artists? Who's
I don't
doing it?
remember the artist. I'm beyond. I'm just a dabbler now. But the
Okay.
premise is that gamma radiation isn't a science thing. It's almost an evil I don't know how to describe it. It is
It's more of a
very,
supernatural thing.
yes, and it is a weird horror, twisty, almost makes me think of early like a Swamp Thing.
Yeah, and
It-
it's dark. It's darker than what you would think a Hulk comic would be, right?
yes, but
In terms of tone.
it's not dark as in just it is more like, I don't know how to describe it, but it is the story, the
Do you find
tone.
that it's do you find that it's easy to care about other characters in addition to the Hulk in this particular telling
It
of the
is
Hulk?
a treatment. I don't want to give anything away. It
Well,
is
you can give a little something away. It's
the
cool. It's all right.
invulnerability. You know how Hulk has this invulnerability?
Right?
It's treated completely different, in a different way.
What is Hulk? What is Immortal Hulk vulnerable to?
No, it's not that. It's not like things just bounce off of him. I don't want to give it away because
I know,
there's
I
a
get it. That's okay.
there's shock involved. You look at this,
Okay.
you'll be like, what? And you'll be like, and
Well,
there's
in a
implications.
spoiler-free way, tell us a bit more about that, the shock element.
Yeah, it is it is weird. We'll say it involves body horror.
Okay, Jeff's being vague, and we can let him off the hook for this one. It's okay, because people
Because you
do
know
have a
what?
hang up
Because
about
if I
spoilers. I know.
no, it's not. It's it. So it, have you ever watched? Have you ever watched Alias?
I have not yet seen Alias, but I do know that the folks who were involved on the production side of it for the television series are well respected and highly regarded by critics.
If you watch that very first episode, it is insanely good. It holds up to any movie. But if you
The
watch
pilot
anything,
episode is that good?
it is that good. You could just stop there.
Where can I
And
find it on streaming service? Which streaming service
Netflix,
carries
Net,
Alias? Netflix?
Netflix, at least it
Okay.
used to. But if you watch anything after that, you will not be able to watch. If you say, you know what, you just happen to watch something later,
Yeah.
you cannot go back to that. You cannot go back to that first episode and feel the same way,
Why?
because now you have knowledge. And as you're watching things unravel, and it is a very much, there is things that they do that are very shocking, and it's
Okay.
not shocking after you see it. And that's the point. It's like sometimes if somebody hints it, there is a certain amount of, for me in general, I'm very, it is very rare for me to be genuinely shocked at at watching a movie or a TV series. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does
Is
happen,
is that
I'm
because as a youngster you were exposed to a lot of it?
no, I think I'm analytical, so I'm not one of those. So when you watch TV, you watch movies. Do you just enjoy the experience and just kind of turn off the brain and say, you know what, I'm on an emotional ride, and I'm not gonna? Or are you the type of person that starts thinking about it as you're watching it?
I am someone whose favorite film of all time is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
Okay.
And I am very prone to becoming emotionally attached to the story and the characters and the narrative. Um, however, if I am going to watch a Schwarzenegger or a Stallone shoot 'em up or whatever, I'm gonna understand that it's time to just turn off the brain and put on the popcorn and have a good time. So I can I can be versatile there, um, and I
Well,
think
I
everyone
can
should be.
too. You know, for a genre, I can be, but I will say in general, most things I can see coming. It's
Okay,
just because most people follow certain tropes.
but hey, maybe you were a private eye in a previous life or something,
No,
you know?
no, no. It's just like it's just things are formulaic. Things are just very formulaic. It's like a lot of times you could see a movie, you're like, okay, this person's going to die. It's kind of like
Why?
Chekhov's. It's like
I
Chekhov's
get you.
gun. You show the gun by the in the first act, it's got to go off by the third. I mean, there's things like that. You're like, okay, this is you're leading up to this. I can put the things together. But there's certain shows, certain movies that happen. And Immortal Hulk is one because I think what was nice is it defied my expectations and it threw me off, and I was shocked. And then there's stuff they did. I'm like, that is the most gruesome thing that I can imagine. You just did it, and I can't believe you just did that. And it
Now I'm
wasn't,
wondering if I should read this or not because it might scare me and give me sleepless nights. What are you doing to
no,
me, Jeff?
no, it's very much Bernie Wrightson early Swamp Things in the '70s, where it was just weird stuff. It's just weird. It is like creepy comics, weird. Uh, in the storyline, it is different. It is the most different thing that I've seen. It was the most. It's very. They did some very fun things with it, and it is a very very fun experience. And
It's nice to see Marvel Comics taking a chance on something like that, right? Because they could just speed food. I'm sorry, I said the word wrong. They could just spoon feed everybody the classic traditional Hulk like we know him. But yet they're giving us something that's a sort of an inside out, upside down version of what we're all expecting. And so maybe they're testing us. Maybe Marvel Comics is testing the readers of all Marvel Comics with the Hulk as an experiment to see how well readers respond to that big of a shakeup. And if it continues to be very successful, as I think it already has been, then perhaps we're going to see them taking more and more chances on things like that within mainstream current continuity. And I know current continuity is a big deal for some readers, and for others, it's really not. And I remember when I was a much younger man, continuity was a much bigger deal. But now that I'm an older man and I've already lived through the flashpoints and the crisis and the rebirth and everything else, I've been through it, and so you become numb to it after a while. Oh, a relaunch, great. Oh, a reboot, great. Okay, we're gonna publish Uncanny X-Men #1. Okay, cool. All of a sudden it's right back to the circle is complete, and I don't mind. It bothered me when I was a much younger man, but I have perspective now. I'm closer to 70 than I am to 30, and that changes the way you see things. I just
well,
appreciate the medium so much. I love it.
as long as you tell a good story, I don't care. I think the point is, I was like you, but I think there's a point where after decades, you get yourself caught into a point where it's like, okay, how many times can we have the X-Men fighting Magneto? I mean,
Yep,
you got to try something different. And
you
I think
do, and
also,
I know.
and also I think too is I think I was a bigger fan of, like, don't change genders and don't change the races of characters. But now I'm like, yeah, I'm all for that. Check it out. Let's
I
just
was
gender
never
bend the
against it.
entire Avengers.
I was never against it. I saw Marvel turn Thor into a lady. I saw
Yeah.
Marvel turn Punisher into a lady. And now they just turned Elektra into the new Daredevil. Have you seen what they've done?
No, no.
They keep doing these wonderful things where they involve the female characters, and they're giving them new life and serving them up to the readers with new iterations of them and
Yeah.
giving you things that you wouldn't expect. Although
Well,
nowadays, I guess you should expect it at this point, but it still is unexpected and still nice to see.
like the Peggy Carter, the short they did on Disney Plus, the cartoon.
I saw that they did What If, the cartoon version,
Yeah,
and they made Peggy Carter a sort of Captain America, which was fun, and that's what Marvel Comics has a cool history of, going back to the 1970s when they first started doing What If, and I always enjoyed the What If comics. Some of them were a little too cheesy for me,
Right.
but most were okay, and some
I
were
think,
even
but
great.
right now, I want a Peggy Carter movie.
You do?
Yes, I want.
Well,
I,
what are you, so what are you going to do about that?
what am I going to do about it? I'm going to write to my congressman.
And then you'll feel much better about yourself afterwards. I promise.
And the thing is, like with the changing of Thor to Jane,
Right,
Jane, what's her name?
Jane.
I forget. Huh?
Yep. Yeah, her name was Jane.
Jane Foster.
Jane Foster, correct?
So they added a cancer story to the thing and gave. It's not just like, okay, we need to make Thor, but make Thor a girl or woman. They said we're going to take Thor and we're going to give it over to Jane Foster, but create a very interesting different plot line or backstory for her and make it like it's not like just rehashing Thor. It's like you're taking this from a completely different perspective and kind of adds freshness to the character of Thor itself by adding a whole lot more new ways of looking at the character, which I think is a lot more. It's refreshing, really.
It is refreshing. All of a sudden now you have depth that wasn't there before the retconning. I love retconning, and my favorite retconning that Marvel did was when they introduced this character about 15 years ago in the Avengers series written by Bendis. The character's name was the Sentry. All of a sudden, here is the Sentry, and he's joining the Avengers, and everybody's like, well, who the hell is the Sentry? Then they start to show you who the Sentry is and why nobody seems to remember him. And then one by one, they start to remember who he is. And it's great. You're peeling back the layers of an onion and getting into deeper and deeper stuff with what you've already been so familiar with already for years. That's a great, very clever, almost genius. Well, we can go ahead and call it genius. Why not? That's a genius way to help comic books remain relevant because readers are discovering things about these characters and these old plot lines that they had no idea about and the impact that they are having. So, not to get all echo chamber on you, my friend, but you are absolutely right about that. And I think that retconning is cool. I've seen folks frown upon it, downplay it, marginalize it, what have you, but I think it's cool and I'm glad that it exists. And I'm already waiting to see what the next big retcon is going to be. We recently had a big reveal in Marvel Comics that you might have missed. Since I know you're only a dabbler, but you'll enjoy knowing that the Watcher who lives on the moon is now Nick Fury and has been for a couple of years. Did you know that?
Yeah, in fact, it was. I think it was. So who went through the black? I'm trying to think which one I read. There was a black. Oh, it was machine. I was reading a Machine Man. Was it Machine Man?
Machine
Someone was
Man.
Machine Man. There's a what if there. He basically his dad died and he was kind of confused. And there's this big black obelisk and he walks through that black obelisk and it strips away all of his things and he's forced to become the. Oh no, that's a different one. The Nick Fury. Somebody was on the moon seeing him, but I've also seen one where he was dead and the Machine Man was becoming the Watcher. But the Nick Fury one, there was another one. Yeah, I can't remember. I read something and I remember him being on there.
Yeah, it's a weird thing that nobody saw coming. And I bet not even you, my friend, with your powers of deductive reasoning and your ability to see plot twists coming from 3 kilometers away. You did not see Nick Fury turning into the Watcher. I know I certainly didn't. I don't think any of us did.
Oh, now I
And
know what confused me. What I'm thinking about was there was another comic book that was showing an alternate post-apocalyptic Earth, and in that
oh,
one, the Machine Man became the Watcher on the moon. But I did see where another one where Nick Fury was the Watcher on the moon. And was he? Is he chained? I can't remember.
was he chained?
Yeah, I
No,
can't remember. Does he move freely, or is he? Or was he? Was he
he's
chained? I
moving.
can't
He's no, he's not chained.
remember.
He's moving freely around. And that's only from within the past 5 years that this happened. And still today, Marvel is riding that Nick Fury as Watcher train, and I have no idea where that's going to go. You can't tell me that that's the end of the line. I'm sure something huge is going to happen with that at some point in the not too distant future. But Marvel does so very little with the Watcher anyway, which is strange to me. I know he was a big part in the What If comics. The Watcher was always your narrator, and he was the fellow who would lead you through the stories. And with what Disney Plus is doing, they got this wonderful voice actor to do the voice of the Watcher for that series. I forget his name. Shame on me. But it was perfect casting for the voice of the Watcher. And now we're going to see, I guess, what Marvel Comics does next. Who the hell knows with the way they've been going lately? And they might they might have the Immortal Hulk eventually at some point become the Watcher. And and neither yourself nor myself would would be able to say that we saw that coming.
Yeah, and I will say for comic books, I will say I'm less likely to see I saw that coming. It's more with movies, and those are the ones that are in TV shows. Those are the ones that I think play to a formula more often than not.
I've recently been rewatching the series Lost, the old ABC series.
I've never
And
seen it.
okay, it's next year. It's coming up on its 20th anniversary year. So I figured, well, why not rewatch it? What the hell? So I started rewatching the first couple of seasons, and I'm seeing twists that I obviously knew about once upon a time because I saw it years ago, but now it all seems so fresh and new to me. It's wonderful that I don't see a lot of the surprises coming. I'm enjoying that. I was expecting
Well,
it to be more predictable,
I
but it's not.
I think it's going to be like Battlestar Galactica, if I remember correctly. Did you watch Battlestar Galactica?
Uh, yes, I did, and I also did a rewatch of that a few years later too. So I went through that, and so I got to see what it was like with when the surprises happened and the reveals happened and all of that, and things things caught me by surprise even during the second time around. Did that
But
happen to you?
I no, I didn't watch the second time around because I my feeling with watching Battlestar Galactica is those twists and turns were not leading to anything. They were just throwing stuff in there to be throwing stuff in there. Because when they at the end tried to tie stuff up, they would just drop stuff that was major lead it and major things. They would just drop it. I'm like, this was major 2 episodes ago. Now you're acting like it never happened. And I realized at the end they didn't know what they're doing. And the thing my loss, I think they've just thrown stuff in to be throwing stuff in. It wasn't to create a cohesive ending. It was just like at the end they're like, well, we got to put this together, tie it up somehow. And it was like
Damn, right?
Battlestar Galactica was not satisfying.
It was messy, and I can totally see Jeff sitting there thinking to himself, okay, where's the payoff? And not finding the payoff.
The payoff was a
Um,
kick in the nuts. That's what the payoff was. I was better off not
oh,
seeing this. I wish this never existed. I wished it had died after season 3 or 2. I just wish it would have been unfinished, and it would have been
if you
perfect
could
in our minds.
if you could time travel and go back to then and watch a different television show instead of Battlestar Galactica, hoping to maybe scratch your sci-fi itch somehow, what show would you have chosen instead?
I don't know, and I think the thing is back then it was less than it was. There's less choices than there is now, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, it's not an easy question. I get you. Um,
Do I
certainly it
don't
had
regret? I guess I
the
don't
science,
really
the
Oh, I'm
special
sorry.
effects were cool at least,
The
and
actors were
the
great.
costumes were cool at least.
It was. I think the first 2 seasons were super excellent.
Yeah,
I think the premise was great. I think all the actors were great. I just think it's. Did you ever watch Heroes?
I love Heroes. In fact, I just started deciding that I was going to rewatch Heroes this year, so I'm going to hold these up on screen here. You can
Oh
probably
yeah,
see. I
I
just
thought
pulled these off my shelf. I'm going to rewatch these.
season 1 I think was perfect. I think season 2 was pretty good, except to the end. And then season 3, it's like, I don't know what you guys are doing. It's just like,
Well, if you ever decide you want to rewatch season 1 just for the hell of it, I'll totally buddy system it with you, and we can compare fun notes along the way. That would be cool.
I might take you up on that.
Characters I like most from that show are the strong female leads, the blondes, Nikki and
Mhm.
the cheerleader.
Save the
And
cheerleader, save the world.
right, I love those two characters and the portrayal of them by those actresses. I thought that was perfect casting. And I love some of the other characters in that show too, and the premise behind it is very Straczynski and Rising Stars. But I really like the 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 concept of a small amount of humans being born with superpowers in a very short amount of time, and then you see what happens with their story. It's a little bit like watching the X-Men in the sense that here are all these gifted youngsters, and but with heroes there's no Professor Charles Xavier type figure. With heroes, they're just all on their own, for good or ill, exploring their own pathways, and whatever happens happens, and discovering the limits of their own powers, just discovering their powers really. And to see what the cheerleader goes through with how she mutilates herself
Yeah.
is mind blowing. And to look back and think, wow, hey, wait a second, this was on major mainstream network television. I would think that that sort of gritty, edgy stuff would have been more suited for cable television. But here it was, right in your
But but
face.
but but it was genius the way they did it because it was funny. It was both icky and funny at the same time.
Yeah, and that character Hero from Japan, who had all of
Yeah.
those scenes, a lot of those scenes took place with him in Japan, and there was Japanese language being spoken. And they would give you English subtitles. And I love that as someone with severe hearing loss, to have that. I've always enjoyed subtitles, and to see that they would incorporate that into the show also, I thought was a courageous move. Here they are exposing people to a bit of Oriental culture, and which is something that you don't see in most shows. And so it was nice to see that. I think Heroes is great on a lot of levels. And I like how that one character with the superpower to draw comic books that turn into reality and to shape events just by what he could do with a paintbrush. That to me is one of my all-time dream powers. I guess if you ask me, like, what's one superpower do I wish I could have, I would think that it would be that one. And I think that I would be instantly using it for the power of good. I think, I would hope. I know that they say that absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think it was Benjamin Franklin maybe who said that, but I am going to say that I would go into it with the very best of intentions, I promise. And I would make sure to paint all sorts of cool stuff for not just me to enjoy, but for Jeff to enjoy too.
Okay, then you got my vote. You got my vote.
Yeah. I would even paint Expedition to the Barrier Peaks adventure modules that contain all of that cool extra stuff that Jeff was talking about earlier. Oh, yes, I would. But yeah, I love Heroes. Great show. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm doing a
Yeah,
rewatch of Lost and Heroes this year. Those are going to be my two.
it's the after the writer's strike. Some people complained about the hero being taking too long in Japan, but I enjoyed that. I enjoyed it up until about the end. I think the
People
two
are always
problems,
going to whine.
but the problem I had with it was more the horn rim glasses guy. The ambiguity of him in the first season was perfect. It's just that they would keep switching good guy, bad guy, good guy, bad guy. And then I think even with Skyler, they just didn't know what to do with him. I just think they lost their way. They really just lost their way. But that first season is absolutely perfect. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. That is probably one of the best seasons of TV, enjoyable, fun, superhero TV out there.
I love the casting for the character Sylar.
Yeah,
Very
he was
cool.
great.
He
He
was.
was great.
That was my first introduction to him as an actor. Prior to Heroes, I didn't know who he was. And then I started to see him in different things as the years went along. And I still enjoy seeing him pop up today. He's pretty cool. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. Even though I think everything he's been in, the things that again I think with that he's been in that I have not liked as well, it hasn't had anything to do with him or his acting ability. I wasn't like, now we're going down the full rambling. Like the Star Trek, I enjoyed the Star Trek reboots to a certain point, but there's
Mhm.
just certain things that just like I find unfathomable. But the actor is great, and just
It's as Siler, he was phenomenal.
yeah,
I
he
don't
was.
think that they could have cast a better actor for that.
And Spock, he's perfect as Spock.
Yeah, and he's really good as Spock, I have to admit. I'm glad that it was recently announced that Chris Pine and everybody is getting together to make another one of those films. And I don't drive myself nuts wondering where it fits into continuity, but I do appreciate it for what it is. And I'll probably be one of those folks who sees it. I still think that Star Trek Into Darkness, where you have Benedict Cumberbatch as the I don't want to say villain, but we'll
God.
we'll we'll call him the anti-hero. Okay, I think that was genius casting as Khan, right? We
Well,
can
I think you could
we
just
we
say
can we can
anything
call
with
him that, but
Benedict's going to be good.
he's Khan, wink, smile, quotation marks. But yeah, that was a great film. Special effects, phenomenal. Production values, phenomenal.
Yeah,
Set
those did
design,
not hold up
costumes,
for me.
everything, very enjoyable.
I
Um,
I, I can see it was a wild ride. It was it just didn't hit it just didn't trigger for me. But that's fine. I'm not gonna. I'm not yuck or yum, but it's just
there's a wonderful part of Star Trek Into Darkness that happens before you even see the opening title screen. They go through this, they're running through this primitive jungle world, and the Enterprise is underwater. And you have Kirk and McCoy running through the jungle
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
escape
yeah.
this primitive tribe, right?
Like
And
Indiana
so,
Jones.
right, like Indiana Jones. And they're trying their best not to disobey the prime directive and reveal the ship to these primitive people because you're not supposed to do that, butterfly effect and all that. So um, they're having this conflict about whether or not to reveal themselves, and they arrive at the conclusion that the only way to get off of that planet is they're going to have to reveal themselves to these primitive tribes. There's no other way around it. Spock is on that volcano, and he's going to die unless they beam him back to ship and get off the planet. And the only way to do all that is to say, hi, prehistoric people, look at what we have. There's just no way around it. And then all of a sudden, as a viewer of the film, I'm wondering, okay, they just violated the one of the prime directives in a major way. We get it. They were already conflicted about whether or not they should do that. They chose to do that because they wanted to save themselves and they wanted to save Spock. So ask yourself this question, Jeff. Did they did they really satisfy the needs of the many, or did they satisfy the needs of the few? And which outweighs which here? It becomes a moral question, doesn't it?
Well, I think it really comes down to is there are very strict rules for the Federation, and Kirk breaks them, and
So
that's
the
really what it's
so the
about.
so what's the lesson? Is the lesson that it's okay to break rules?
Well, yes, that's what Kirk does. He breaks the rules.
Okay,
He
okay,
cheats his way to success
okay.
from his
That's a
very
very
from his
good
very
way of putting it.
inception. Yeah,
That's a
from
very
the
good way of putting it.
from the more the whatever the Teriyaki Maru or whatever that's called. I mean, he won by cheating, but by cheating he demonstrated that he was able to think on a different level.
Isn't it weird to think about Star Trek as a franchise that glorifies cheating and breaking rules and lying? Think about that for a second and then snap back to reality and question everything.
It's like it's I think for what it is, it's just I don't get caught up in the thinking. I just think it's kind of I understand what they're doing, and I think that's why I enjoy the original. I never cared much for the later series at all, but I
You
just
like the
enjoy.
original series.
I do. I think the chemistry, I think the chemistry between three characters, they made it work. I think
They did.
yeah,
The first original season gives you everything you need. It even gives you all the colors you need.
yeah,
Because think about the colors that they're wearing on board that ship. They're wearing red, yellow, and blue. What are they? Those are the primary colors. From those three colors, you can make every other color you can think of. It's a nice little, I want to say almost subliminal thing to let you know that, hey, we're giving you everything that you need. You're finding it all right here. You don't need anything else.
yeah,
Yet they went on to give us the next generation, which I didn't care much for. I didn't feel like Picard was the maverick that Kirk was, and I wanted that quality in my starship captain. And if I'm not going to get it from Picard, what else am I going to get from Picard? I'm going to get stoicism. Okay, stoicism is cool. I'm going to get wisdom. He's older and wiser. Okay, I get that. That's cool. But is that what I'm really looking for here? No. So the next generation didn't become my Star Trek. Um, Plus, I was also, you know, very satisfied with the original. I didn't feel like I needed anything else, and I think that's why I like the Chris Pine Star Trek. Some of my friends call it Pine Trek. Okay, that's why I like the Pine Trek so much. I think is because it parrots the original while still being something different and giving me Beastie Boys music and all of
yeah.
the stuff that makes it feel new. It does, it feels nice and new, and I like that. Plus, it's the same old thing. Yes, Carl Urban does Dr. McCoy maybe a little too perfectly. I don't mind it. Hey, listen, perfection is great. And if you're going to strive for it, go for it. And if that's what this film wants to do, then okay, fine. I'm okay with it. It's just like the original to me, and I like it. I can do without the third one, Star Trek Beyond. I don't know if I dig that one so much, although it was fun seeing Chris Pine ride around on a motorcycle as Captain Kirk. That was fun. That was my big takeaway from the third film they did. And now it looks like we're getting a fourth one, which I'm pretty excited about. I don't know what they're doing, where they're
Yeah,
planning to take it.
I will watch it. I just probably won't watch it in the theater. But
Well, you and I should compare notes about it afterwards, see what we think. We can do RPG Ramblings, the Pine Trek edition. No, just kidding. But anyway, getting back over to RPGs, you may have seen what's happening at Benchley Academy
yeah,
a
that's what I was
little
going to
bit
tell you. We're
lately.
getting close to the time space. We haven't really talked about really what exactly is. Why don't you start from the beginning as far as Benchleydale, the origin
Well,
issue. What is Benchleydale?
what do you think it is?
Um, all I know is it looks like okay, putting together. It looks like it's a community built around. I'm going to guess playing advanced D&D, and it seems like from what I also have read, it looks like you're trying to put modules into specific locations and trying to create a unified world around these adventures. And it's kind of more of I'll say collaborative, but it's kind of more of a shared first edition style universe.
Congratulations, my friend. You have just discovered the tip of the iceberg. The tip of the tip. Yes, you are right. It is all of those things. And the origins of it date back to, I want to say 2007, 2008, 2008, I think. This was when our Easy Town Radio podcast was winding down. We had just done our 26th episode, and we were getting ready to think about what to do next creatively, just as creative people who need creative outlets. And for me, I wanted to revisit first edition AD&D, so I began to put together the sandbox for the classic GDQ 1 through 7 campaign. And so I put in a little place for where the hill giant had his fortress, and I put in a little place for where the king has his castle, and That's the king who's going to give the heroes their mission to go and take care of the hill giants and then go take care of the frost giants after that, and so on. So it just began as one little map. It became to be known as the little map that could. It was the little map that measured, I think, 14 inches by 11 inches. Oh no, 17 by 14. 17 by 14, I think. And I sprinkled in a few places involving a few adventure modules and had this be the sandbox in which our players would have their adventures. So we began to use that. That was in its earliest stage. And then as a few years went by, and by the time 2012, 2013 rolled around, I had become a writer for Gygax magazine, which ran for 6 issues. So that was fun. I was involved with TSR 2.0 and became a senior editor for their multiverse website for TSR Hobbies, where we had done all sorts of great stuff, great articles with content for folks that would come and visit the site. Luke Gygax and I started to chat, and Luke got involved, became a co-creator with me of the Benchley Sandbox, and he started creating some cities, and we started putting them around, and he started helping me create certain situations, and he created our quote-unquote Godzilla for the Benchley world, and he is called the Ruko. Just like Gary Gygax before him created Unga for his Isle of the Ape adventure module, Luke Gygax created the Ruko, which our players have still not yet encountered, by the way. But so there's a bit about the origins. It dates back to 2008, and it began to develop a lot more by the time 2012 and 2013 rolled around, and the collaborations with Luke began, and then the collaborations with Keith Baker began. And so between the 3 of us, before we knew it, we had this incredible sandbox that had encompassed more than 100 of the classic TSR and Judges Guild adventure modules and locations and places of interests and big bads. We just data mined all of it from the classic source material, and renaming very little, if anything, not even bothering to reskin stuff, just taking it, plugging it in, and creating this sort of vibrant sandbox that has more than 400,000 square miles of adventure area with all of these different types of climate and terrain sprinkled about here and there. There's mountains and there's jungles and there's glaciers and there's wherever you want to go. And wherever you go, you might find all of a sudden you're caught into an adventure module of some sort. We have different ones right now that are running right at the moment that are sort of happening in the background. The G3 adventure module where the players go to fight the Fire Giant King is currently in progress, and that is having an impact on what goes on in game time with other adventures that are being run by other dungeon masters. So it becomes a sort of living, breathing, I almost want to say museum for the old modules, helping to keep the old ways alive a little bit, helping to nourish those old roots of the RPG hobby in a fun way that's inclusive and immersive and collaborative, and saying to the world, we're here and we're not here because we want to monetize this in any way. We're not trying to have this be about money. We're trying to have this be about, hey, we're here. Who knows for how much longer? So let's enjoy our time together, and let's not only celebrate the classics, but let's commemorate them too and give them new life in fun ways. For instance, I've been DMing S3 for 2 years now. How does one DM a module for 2 years? Well, the module is called Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. With me as the DM, emphasis is on the word expedition. We have 2 parties. This is a double helix. campaign, which means we have two parties on their own adventure helix, intertwining, happening in real game time with one another, simultaneous, right? So here we've got one party that went to the crash landed UFO. They traveled 500 miles from the King's Castle where they were given their mission, and now they are 500 miles away from the King's Castle. The other party is search and rescue to find the first party. And that other party is 500 miles away at the King's Castle. Their adventure begins at the same time as the other adventure begins. So one party in the spacecraft, another party looking for that party, and dragging it out with all sorts of fun NPC interaction in between, and exploring of the sandbox, going through the map, visiting this town, that town, visiting this fort, that fort, contemplating whether or not to allow yourself to enjoy a side quest in this module or that module. There's temptation at every turn. So when I say emphasis on expedition, I also mean that half the fun is getting there. So as a DM, for me, I am interested in seeing how long we can continue this adventure. There has not yet been one player character death in all of these 2 years, amazingly so. And yet there have been plenty of NPC deaths, and some of them quite memorable. And at the time, some of our players were role-playing the NPCs when the NPCs died. That's another way we keep things fresh here. We incorporate players as role-playing NPCs. You can come and join my adventure, but just keep in mind that you'll be asked to improvisationally role-play NPCs on the spot while knowing very little about them, if anything at all, or perhaps knowing something about them, just enough to give you something to work on. So that's a bit about the sandbox itself. And word started to get around, and now we receive promotional samples from all of these wonderful companies looking to boost their signal and have us award promotional samples of their stuff as prizes in our contests, whether it's dice or dice trays or dice towers or anything. I mean, you've probably seen some of the stuff that we give away as prizes in the contests, and it just keeps rolling in. People want to support first edition AD&D. They love what we do. We are also NSFW. We are underground. You can say we are the NSFW darlings of the underground first edition AD&D hobby. That might be a good way to explain us. What we do is for adults, by adults, and we have a good time with that and enjoying that ourselves. And having that creative outlet is nice. And again, knowing that we're not trying to monetize this in any way or boost our fame in any way. I'm not really one of those people that's interested in fame, but I certainly am interested in seeing the first edition AD&D hobby remain something that is celebrated and commemorated. And if I can be one of the folks who helps with that, then I feel like I'm doing the right thing. So for me, it comes down to that, really, just knowing that I'm enjoying the hobby and having it be something I can turn to give me peace and to give me the scratch on the itch that can only be scratched in this way. It's a strange way to scratch an itch when you think about how few people celebrate first edition AD&D or still play it today. Most of the first edition AD&D hobbyists that I first enjoyed the hobby with many years ago moved on to the next later editions or moved on to other systems altogether and never really came back to first edition AD&D. Never really, in my opinion, explored it enough. There's a lot to explore. That's not to also take away the fact that there's a lot else to explore too. And so I don't want to say that
Right.
first edition AD&D is better or put it on a pedestal and say that, So don't misconstrue my meaning, but first edition AD&D, sometimes I'll see folks come back to it and enjoy it with us for their first time in a lot of years. And they'll say to me, Tim, I haven't played first edition AD&D in 30 years. This is going to be great. I said, yeah, it is going to be great. And I'm not going to be one of those hobbyists who says, where have you been all this time? Harumph. And I'm not
Yeah.
going to be one of those hobbyists who says, welcome back. I'm going to be the hobbyist who says, welcome home. That really is Benchville Academy, a place where people can go and be themselves, where adults can go and be adults and enjoy adult-themed situations and adult humor and adult language and not have to filter yourselves, really. That's not what we're about. We do it tastefully, though, mind you, and nobody's getting out of hand here. But we do appreciate the R-rated element of what goes on here. We all have that side of us. We rarely have the creative outlet or a place where we can go to express ourselves in that manner. And this is a place where that can be done. And it's not just adventures and contests. There's a lot of stuff that goes on at Benchleydale Academy also that falls into the entertainment category. We have game shows. We've taken the Hollywood Squares game show and we've turned it into Benchleydale Squares, in which we have, instead of 9 celebrities that you might know on Hollywood Squares, many of which are C-list or B-list, mind you, in Benchleydale Squares, you'll have 9 NPCs that are often role played by our players. And during the game, I'll be the host of the game show, and we'll have 2 players go head to head as player 1 and player 2, and they have to ask the Benchleydale NPCs. Well, I'm sorry, they don't ask. The host asks the players a question. They then choose to agree or disagree, and they must agree or disagree with what it is that the NPC says. I think I'm explaining it very poorly, but the point is, we have game shows here. You can enjoy Benchleydale Squares. You can enjoy Bottle That Genie, which is another favorite of ours. You can also enjoy the Gossip Game, and you can enjoy other programming, such as Inside Joke, which we just launched last night. That's going to be a new show, quote unquote, that you can follow along with at Benchleydale Academy. And Inside Joke is going to be, and already is now that we had our first ever episode of it last night, our pilot episode. It is the first and only, and probably will be the only ever, first edition AD&D show in the galaxy that features inside jokes that you would be aware of if you partook in our S3 campaign that's ongoing, the Double Helix campaign. And so we did one that we put up our first episode last night, and it's already been a big hit. I see we got some likes. And let's see, that one was starring Jimmy Fallon and Elmo. So if you're out there and you caught the very first ever episode of Inside Joke, I hope you enjoyed it. So be on the lookout for more Inside Joke here at Benchleydale Academy. And and also if you have ideas for game shows or content programming that you might like to see at Benchleydale Academy, you can feel free to either let myself know or let any of our faculty know. We have many fine headmasters and headmistresses here at the Academy who help the cadets as they come in and help to show them around, give them an orientation, as it were. And from time to time, I'll film on Zoom an orientation of, hey, here's what's new at the Academy. Hey, here's how you can get involved, or if you just want to hang out and be a friend of the show, that's cool too. It's up to you. And you can find the orientation videos at our YouTube channel. It's amazing to me to think we actually have a YouTube channel with more than 5 followers. We have somewhere between 80 and 90 followers now, which is almost inconceivable. But thanks to all those out there who've been following along with us on YouTube. And if you would ever like to see a taste of what happens during our S3 Double Helix Expedition to the Barrier Peaks campaign, you can find the actual play video recordings are there. We use Zoom as a platform for this. We do not use Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or Discord or any of the other more popular, more conformist avenues. I like Zoom because of its non-conformist element, and there's a big part of that also in me as a person, and I think a lot of that comes out with Benchleydale Academy. Much of what we do is non-conformist in nature, and I quite frankly think there should be a lot more of that in the world. Pun intended when I say frankly, as in Frank Zappa, one of my big heroes in terms of being a creative expresser of creative vision. I often look to Frank Zappa and his music and his creations for inspiration for myself. Miles Davis, too. This was when I was still a music producer, which I no longer am. The entertainment world was fun, and it almost destroyed me, and I was glad to escape it. And I realized early enough that fame isn't for me. But I'm able to find still that I can use a lot of my entertainment background in what we do at Benchleydale Academy to help keep things fresh and fun, not just for those who enjoy the more hands-on approach with us and for those who partake in the contests and the adventure sessions and our workshops, but even for those who just want to chill, come into the Academy, chill, enjoy the show, enjoy the content, chime in once in a while, click like or click whatever, click haha. I don't care really what you do at the Academy. Just um, don't be a prick. And we have had to swing a banhammer on more than one occasion, and that's always fun. You might think I was about to say, oh, that's never fun, but no, that's always fun. I'm an old banhammer pro, and Benchleydale Academy isn't the only Facebook group that I've been an admin for. And I've had an awful lot of practice with knowing when it's time to see the writing on the wall and remove the bad apple from the bunch, and to do it quietly.
Yeah, we're all adults. We have limited time. We're here for an experience. We're not here to be experiencing the drama that other people want to drag into a group. It's like there's plenty of
Right.
other places to bring drama. There's legitimate places to put your drama, but you know what?
Yes,
You're there for
that's
a
right.
specific reason. So you know,
That's right.
there's Twitter if you really want drama.
Yeah, and there is a lot of benefit that comes from swinging the banhammer, and I know people are reluctant to swing the banhammer, and I think I understand why. But I'm here to tell you that the banhammer is your friend, and so it's okay. You can quote me on that. I have swung it mightily at times. I have swung it quietly at times, and sometimes I all I have to do is just wave it in the air, not swing it, and people will behave themselves. It's a very useful tool, and I think that people ought to use it. Um, anyway, that's a bit about what goes on here at Bench Little Academy, and I hope I didn't lose you there. There's a lot
Oh
of
no,
ground to cover with it. I
no.
don't know of anything else quite like it, and it still hasn't yet become what it could be. It hasn't reached its maximum potential. And I don't even know what its maximum potential could be or is. And that's also part of the adventure for us too.
Yep.
Um,
That's when
so we'll
endeavor. You
see.
just don't know, right? You just put it out there and you do your best, and it sounds like you're putting a lot of effort towards it. So, yeah, on Facebook, I'll include links on there on the show notes. But anyway, I think we're hitting the time space continuum, Tim. I think we're hitting. And thank you for coming on. It's been a great
My
discussion, and it's
pleasure,
also
bro.
great to learn
Thank
about
you.
Benchleydale and the work that you're putting into it, the direction that you're going.
Well, I appreciate the time, and I greatly appreciate also, Jeff, what you are doing with RPG Ramblings, and I hope that it continues to grow. And I'm going to do my part to help boost the signal, and I hope that you'll share your posts at Benchleydale Academy too, and let them know what's happening with the RPG stuff. I think that would be very cool.
If you're wanting to, I try to be very considerate where I post my. So I'm also an admin for the RPG Zine group, and I try not to only post ones that are related to zines. But we can talk later. But I have no problems posting there as well. But I don't want to also be that guy.
You don't have to worry about it with us, pal. It's quite all right. Thank you.
All right, you take care.
You do the same.